He was my husband, my home, and my greatest blessing. I thought we had more time. Good day, everyone. Everyone, this is my husband's secretary. This is not the time.
With all due respect, I think it is exactly the time.
It's okay, buddy.
The man lying in that casket, Cedric Freeman, your husband, is the father of my child. That's my brother's secret, baby ma. Say it again, baby. Say it again for the people in the back. And she's not the only one. What? My name is LaToya Green, and that is also my child's father. He is my baby daddy. Wake up!
Call 911! Help her up!
Is she breathing?
Lord have mercy. I need you to hold on right there with me because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, girl, how did you end up here standing at your own husband's funeral, reading his life story? With two women walking in claiming your man had outside children at his funeral. I know I had the same question. And baby, the answer is long. Because nothing about what happened that day was what it looked like. But I didn't know that yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we go into this, hit that subscribe button on Precify Stories right now and turn on that notification bell because you are going to want to be notified when the next one drops. Like this video and drop your country in the comments right now. I see you from everywhere and I love every single one of you. Now, let us begin. My name is Alicia. Che and I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. That's where I come from. My mama, Kendra Whitfield, was a woman who could do more with $20 in a prayer than most people could do with 100. She worked at the school cafeteria Monday through Friday. She ironed clothes for 3 families on the weekends. She sang in the church choir every Sunday. And she raised me by herself. My daddy left when I was 4 years old. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I used to. Lord knows I used to. But I've lived enough life now to know that some people are not built to stay. And the ones who leave, they leave a space. And what you fill that space with is up to you. I filled mine with books, with learning, with this burning, unreasonable, almost stubborn need to understand how things work. Business, systems, money, how it moves, where it goes, yet who has it and who doesn't and why. By the time I was 16, I had read every business book in the public library that I could get my hands on. By the time I was 17, I had a notebook full of business ideas, real ones, not the dreamy, vague kind, actual plans, with numbers, with timelines, with steps. My teacher, God bless her, Mrs. Holloway, she saw something in me and got me into a summer program at a community college. That summer changed everything. I sat in those classes and I felt like someone had finally turned a light on in a room I had been living in without realizing how dark it was. I went on to study business management in college, full scholarship, first person in my immediate family to finish a 4-year degree. My mama cried at that graduation. She stood up in the middle of the bleachers with her good church hat on and cheered. I still see her face when I close my eyes sometimes. The pride in her, the relief. You know when a single mom trained her daughter all by herself and the daughter ends up graduating and making you proud? That this was worth it radiating off her body like heat. And I thought that degree was going to open every door. I thought I would walk into the professional world and people would see what I had and recognize it. I had the grades, I had the knowledge, I had the drive. What I didn't have was connections. And baby, in Mississippi, in any state, really. Connections are everything. You don't know the right people? You don't get the call back. You don't get the interview. You definitely don't get the job. Yet I applied to 43 positions in the first year after I graduated. 43. I got 7 interviews and 0 offers. Not because I wasn't qualified. Every single person who interviewed me told me I was impressive, told me I was sharp, told me my presentation was excellent, and then they didn't call. Or they called to tell me they went with someone else, someone who had interned there, someone who had a family friend on the board, someone whose uncle played golf with the hiring manager. That's the real world. Nobody warned you about that part. So I did what I always did. I looked at the situation. I assessed what I had, and I made a move. What did I have? Knowledge, work ethic that could scare you, a mama's kitchen that had taught me how to cook food that made grown people bite their tongue. Oh, and I knew how to make people feel taken care of. So, I started a catering service out of my apartment. $300 to start, my mama's good pot, a borrowed folding table. Word of mouth in the church community. The first event I catered was a baby shower for 30 people. I made smothered chicken, dirty rice, candied yams, and a peach cobbler that had the women asking for the recipe before the party was even over. I charged $250. Clear profit after supplies was maybe $80, but it was mine. Every penny of it was mine. I built from there. Over the next 2 years, I went from catering baby showers and birthday parties to corporate lunches, then to private events, then to weekend supper clubs. I hired 2 women to help me. I rented a commercial kitchen space. I had a real menu, a real website, and a real booking system. People were calling me from outside of Jackson. I was driving 2 hours each way on weekends to do events in other cities. I was exhausted. I was running on 5 hours of sleep most nights, but I was building something. And I knew in my bones that I was just getting started. I met Cedric Freeman on a Saturday morning in October. The leaves were doing that thing they do in Mississippi in fall where the air is cool, but the sun still has some heat left in it. That beautiful, specific kind of October weather. I was at the farmer's market on State Street. It was a vendor's market day, and I had a booth. I was selling my jarred goods, preserves, pepper sauce, seasoning blends, because I had figured out that the jarred products had better margins than the catering, and I was testing the market. He came to my booth. He was with a friend. Just 2 men walking through the market on a Saturday morning. Clearly there for the barbecue samples at the end of the row and not particularly interested in pepper sauce. But he stopped at my booth. He picked up my habanero peach pepper sauce. He turned it over in his hand. He read the label. He said, not looking up, "You made this yourself?" I said, yes. He looked up, and that was the first time I saw his face properly. Lord, now I am not a woman who loses her composure easily. I have been known in certain circles to be what my best friend Monique calls unbothered to the point of concerning. But Cedric Freeman's face was something else. Broad-chested man, a full beard, not the kind people grow for style, the kind that just belongs on a face. Dark skin, deep and rich like good mahogany. He was not rich. Yet I could tell that immediately. His clothes were clean and neat but not expensive. He put the pepper sauce back down. He said, "How long does it last once you open it?" I said, 6 months in the refrigerator, but most people finish it in 3 weeks. He smiled, just slightly. He said, "That confident about it?" I said, "That's just what the feedback says, sir." He bought 2 jars. He started to walk away. And I don't know what came over me. I am a woman who minds her business. I mind my business so well it's almost a gift. But something about the way he walked away, steady, unhurried, like he was carrying something heavy without showing it, something about that made me speak. I said, "There's a card in the bag if you have questions about the sauce." He stopped. He turned back. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Why'd I might have questions?" That was it. That was where it started. He texted 3 days later, not about the sauce. He asked if the farmer's market ran every Saturday. I said yes through November. He said good. That Saturday he came back. He didn't buy anything. He stood at my booth for 40 minutes while I helped 3 other customers. And when the rush slowed down, he asked me if I had eaten lunch. I said no. He said, "There's a barbecue place 2 blocks from here. Best brisket in town. You have time?" I had time. Monique always says that I was the one who pursued Cedric. And technically she's right, because it was me who texted him the Monday after that lunch. It was me who said, "That brisket was excellent. I'm going to recreate that seasoning. You want to try it when I do?" He said yes, And from there, we started talking every day. Just talking, through texts at first, then phone calls. Then he started coming by the commercial kitchen on his lunch break from the warehouse where he was working. Just sitting, just being there. While I cooked and prepped and packed and labeled, he never got in the way. He never made it about himself. He just showed up. And I fell in like before I realized I was falling in love. About 6 weeks in, I asked him to dinner. Proper dinner. At a restaurant. I asked him. Not because I was trying to be forward, because I could see that he wanted to ask me and something was holding him back. I found out later what that was. He'd been managing his own quiet weight. A job he hated. A bank account that he was careful about. Dreams that he'd been telling himself were probably not going to happen. He had this idea. A logistics company. That he had worked in warehousing and distribution for 7 years at that point, and he understood the gaps in the supply chain better than most people with degrees. He had the knowledge. The practical, hands in it, I've watched this system fail every single week knowledge. What he didn't have was the business structure to turn it into something, the how to incorporate, the how to write a business plan that banks would take seriously, the how to build a client base before you have a track record. First dinner we had, we talked for 4 hours. About business, about Mississippi, about the economy, about what it takes to build something from nothing. I don't think either one of us went home thinking it was a romantic dinner. We went home thinking we had met someone we could talk to, which is rarer and more dangerous. Not we dated for 5 months before I showed him my notebook. The real one, the one with the business plans and the margin analyses and the expansion projections. I sat him down at my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in March and I laid it out. What he needed to do, step by step. He read every page. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he looked up at me and said, Cedric Freeman said quiet, "Why are you doing this for me?" I said, "Because you have something real and it would be a waste for it to stay in your head." He was quiet again. Then he said, "Alicia, I don't have money to." I said, "I know I'm not asking for money. I'm asking you to let me help you build something." He looked at me for a long time. Cedric Freeman said slowly, "I don't know how to repay this." I said, "You don't owe me anything. I'm your girlfriend. Now, this is just what you do for people you care about." He didn't say anything else, but the way he looked at me. Lord, the way that man looked at me, like I'm some sugar, like I'm his melted chocolate, like I was something he hadn't expected, like I was something he wasn't entirely sure he deserved. That look, I kept that look in my chest like a cold for warmth on every cold day that came after. Over the next 8 months, I worked with Cedric to build Freeman Logistics from nothing into something. I helped him write the business plan. I connected him with a small business resource center I had used before. I introduced him to an attorney I had met through a catering client who helped him incorporate properly. I sat with him through every bank meeting, every pitch, every rejection. And there were rejections. 3 banks said no before one said yes. The loan wasn't big, but it was enough to get the first truck, one truck, his name on the side, Freeman Logistics. I remember the day that truck pulled up. Cedric stood in the parking lot looking at it like he didn't quite believe it was real. Then he turned around and looked at me, and that big, strong man's eyes filled up. He didn't cry. He pulled it back, but I saw it, and I loved him so much in that moment it scared me. He carried me and took me into the passenger seat and drove me around town. Within a year, Freeman Logistics had 3 trucks. Cedric had hired 4 drivers and an operations manager. He had secured a contract with a regional grocery chain, then a furniture manufacturer, then a medical supply distributor. Money started coming. Real money. Not the kind where you're comfortable. Not the kind where you look at your bank account and then look at it again because you don't quite believe the number. And Cedric, God the man, the first thing he did when the first big payment hit was come to my apartment with flowers and a cashier's check. I looked at the check. I said, "Cedric, what is this?" He said, "It's yours. You built this as much as I did. More, probably." I said, "I don't want this." He looked at me like I was speaking another language. Cedric Freeman said, Alicia? I said, I don't want your money. I want you. He stood in my doorway holding flowers and a check, and he just stared at me. Then he said very quietly, Cedric Freeman said, then marry me. I blinked. I said, what? He said, marry me. I'm serious, baby. I've been serious since the first time you talked to me like I was worth something. I did not cry. I am not a crier. But my throat went very tight, and I said, yes. I said yes. And my man slid that ring into my finger, and we shared a happy moment thereafter. We got married 7 months later. Small ceremony. Sweet. My mama in the front row with her good hat and
That's
her
my
good dress
girl.
and her
That's my
face full of
baby.
everything she'd
That's my
worked
girl.
for.
That's my baby.
Remember, she's a single mom who raised her daughter all by herself. Her only daughter's now getting married. The joy, the happy tears, the proud feeling. And that was beautiful. That part was so beautiful, but Cedric's family. That's where things got complicated. His relatives had been watching him build this company, watching the money come in. Yeah, watching him go from the man who was careful about every dollar to the man who had real assets. And some of them, not all, but some of them, had decided that there was only one explanation for how a man who had been ordinary for most of his adult life suddenly became successful. And that explanation was, his wife must be after his money. I heard it through the grapevine before the wedding. Monique told me. She had been at a cookout at one of Cedric's cousins' houses and overheard a whole conversation. Monique Bradley said on the phone, voice sharp with irritation, Alicia, they're saying you came out of nowhere. They're saying you showed up and attached yourself to him right when he was starting to make money. I said, Monique. She said, I know, girl. I'm just telling you what they're saying. I said, well, I know what they're saying. Let them say it. But oh, it was going to be so much more than just words. The loudest voice, the most relentless one, was Cedric's older sister, Denise Freeman. Now, let me tell you something about Denise. She is a woman who is not short on opinions. She is not short on confidence. She is not short on accessories or weaves or expensive boots. She had been married 5 times, 5. Every marriage ended badly, every single one. And I say that not to judge her and not to mock her, because Lord knows marriage is hard, very, very hard. But I say it to give you some context about where her wisdom on relationships was coming from, because she was going to position herself as the expert on who was worth marrying and who wasn't. And I was in the wasn't column from day one. The first time I formally met Denise was at a family dinner the month before our wedding. She wore a cream blazer set, long straight blonde wig, slicked edges so neat they looked painted on, rings on almost every finger, handbag that I recognized as expensive even at a distance. She walked into that house like she was inspecting it, like she owned something in there. She shook my hand, not hugged me, shook my hand, like I was a business contact. And she looked me up and down in a way that was so quick you might have missed it if you weren't watching. But I was watching. I'm always watching. She said, so you're the one. I said, I'm the one. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Denise Freeman said, pleasantly, Cedric has been very enthusiastic about you. I said, I hope so. We're getting married. She made a sound. Now, not quite a laugh, more like a acknowledging noise, like she was filing that information away for later use. At dinner, she sat across from me. She talked about herself for 40 minutes. She asked Cedric about his business for 10. She asked me nothing. Not my name, not my background, not what I did, nothing. I was furniture in that conversation. Cedric noticed. He kept trying to bring me into the conversation. Alicia was actually the one who, you should hear what Alicia did with the business plan. Baby, tell her about the distribution contract. And each time Denise would listen for about 30 seconds and then redirect. Toward herself, toward some cousin, toward Cedric's business, toward anything that wasn't me. I sat there, I ate my food. I was polite and warm and present because I am my mama's daughter. Daddy and my mama raised me to be the bigger person even when other people were making themselves very small. But I clocked everything. I clocked everything. Every single thing. The wedding day was beautiful. Cedric cried when he saw me. He stood at that altar, and when I came through those doors in my dress, white, clean lines, natural, he put his hand over his mouth and his eyes just welled up. That man, that beautiful, solid man. He loved me so out loud. He was never shy about it.
That's my wife! Y'all better don't trip. That's
He
my
said that
wife!
everywhere. Every room we walked into, every gathering, he found ways to say it. Not in a showy way, in the way of a man who genuinely could not believe his luck and wanted everyone to know. And Lord, I loved him so deeply it almost felt dangerous because I had spent my whole life being careful. Being strategic, being the one who thought 5 steps ahead. But with Cedric, I had let myself just feel it, feel all of it without calculating, without protecting myself. That was the most vulnerable I had ever been in my life. And I genuinely thought that he was worth that. The first year of marriage was the richest year of my life. And I don't mean just money. Though yes, the business was growing in ways that were almost hard to keep up with. Cedric had expanded to 12 trucks. He had hired a small administrative team. He had leased a proper office in downtown Jackson. I had transitioned my catering business into a full consulting practice, helping small food businesses structure and scale. And I had more clients than I had hours in the day. We were building, together. 2 people who had come from nothing. They're building something together. We had a house now, a real one, 3 bedrooms, a backyard, in a neighborhood I used to drive through as a teenager and just look at the houses and wonder what it felt like inside. I knew what it felt like now. It felt like work and love and purpose all mixed up together. It was everything. But I will be honest with you, because this is that kind of story, even in the middle of everything being beautiful. Denise Freeman was a stone in my shoe. Every family gathering, every holiday, every time our family assembled in one place, she was there, and she was looking for something. I didn't know what. I felt like we should be cool as woman to woman. I never thought a sister-in-law can be a problem. I always felt it was mother-in-law, not sisters. At the time, I thought it was just personality. Some people are difficult. Some people need to assert dominance in every room. Some people were raised to believe that the loudest person wins. I just thought that's who Denise was. But it was more than that. It was more deliberate than that. I just couldn't see it yet. In the second year of our marriage, Cedric's business crossed the threshold that changed the scale of everything. A national distribution company reached out to him. They wanted to acquire a stake in Freeman Logistics. A partnership, not a buyout. A partnership that would give Cedric access to a national network while he retained ownership of the Mississippi and surrounding region operations. The number on that offer. Lord, the number on that offer was massive. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with Cedric at 11 o'clock at night. He had the documents spread out in front of us. And I looked at that number, and then I looked at my husband, and he was calm, he was steady, like he had always known this day was coming. Like he had been working toward exactly this. He looked at me. Cedric Freeman said, "We started with 1 truck." I said, "1 truck." He said, "And your pepper sauce." I laughed and replied, "And my pepper sauce." He reached across the table and held my hand. Cedric Freeman said, "Alicia, everything I have, you had a hand in building it. I need you to know that I know that." I said, "Cedric." He said, "No, I'm serious. I was working at that warehouse going nowhere. I would have stayed there, comfortable with just enough to get by. You came and you looked at me and you saw something I wasn't even fully seeing in myself yet." I pressed his hand. I said, "You already had it. I just helped you organize it." He shook his head. He said, "Let me thank you properly." And that night, that beautiful, quiet night with the papers on the table in the late hour and the 2 of us in that kitchen we had worked hard to put ourselves in. That night is one I carry with me, even now, even after everything. I carry it. You already know what happened after such conversations. Don't judge me. It's what couples do. The partnership deal went through, and Cedric Freeman became, in the language of Mississippi gossip, bastardly rich. That's what they started saying. Bastardly rich. Filthy rich. The kind of rich that changes how people talk to you, how they look at you, how they find reasons to be around you. The family gatherings changed immediately. People who had barely spoken to Cedric at the wedding were now calling every week. Cousins showing up uninvited to the house. Old school friends appearing from nowhere with business proposals. And Denise Hudsoma, who had always been involved in Cedric's life, became somehow more present, more interested. She started coming over every week, Sunday dinners, which fine. Family is family. But the Sundays started to feel like performances, like she was watching, like she was cataloging things. And the things she said to me, just to me, when Cedric wasn't in the room. You know, Cedric always said he wanted a big family. I hope you're not making him wait too long. This house is lovely. Are you thinking about redoing the kitchen? I know a designer. You look differently from what Cedric used to say his type was. But I guess people change, right? Small, seemingly innocent. If you heard any one of those things alone, you'd think, well, that's just a sister being a little extra. But together, week after week, they started to build into something. A picture of me that was wrong, that I was a placeholder, that I was temporary, that I didn't quite fit. I told Monique about it one evening. We were shopping in a supermarket. Monique Bradley said, "Girl, what is she actually saying to you?" I said, "Nothing I can point to directly." It's the way she says it." Monique said, "That's the worst kind." I said, "I keep waiting for Cedric to notice." Monique said, "Does he notice?" I was quiet. I said, "He sees her as his sister. He grew up looking up to her. I don't think he sees what I see." Monique said, "Have you told him?" I said, "I've tried, but I don't want to be the wife who comes between a man and his sister." Monique said, "Baby, you already are between them. She's just fighting for a position you don't even know she's competing for." I thought about that for a long time after she left. I still didn't understand how right Monique was. It was a Sunday in February, cold outside. Denise had come for Sunday dinner. We were in the kitchen, me and Denise, while Cedric was on a call in his home office. He was dealing with something that had come up with one of the regional managers. It was just the two of us in that kitchen. And for about 20 minutes, it was almost fine. Almost. We talked about the food. We talked about the weather. We talked about nothing that mattered. And then Denise looked at me. She looked me up and down slowly. Denise Freeman said, "You've been married almost 2 years now." I said, "Almost?" She said, "And no baby yet." I kept my eyes on the pot I was stirring. I said, "We're working on it." Denise Freeman said, "Are you?" I looked up. She was looking at me with an expression that I can only describe as carefully neutral. The kind of neutral that is doing a lot of work. Denise Freeman said, "Because Cedric has always wanted children. He talked about it for years. A family. A big family." I said, "No, I know what my husband wants." She said, "Don't. Do you?" I set the spoon down. I turned to face her completely. I said, "Denise." She said pleasantly, "I'm just asking questions. A wife should be able to discuss these things." I said, "These things? What things?" She met my eyes. Denise Freeman said, "Whether you're actually able to give him what he needs." The kitchen went very quiet. I said carefully, "Say what you mean." She smiled. She actually smiled. Denise Freeman said, "Smooth as butter. Some women can't bear children, Alicia. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But it does need to be discussed. Because if you can't give Cedric a family," I said, "get out of my kitchen." She blinked. Denise Freeman said, "Excuse me?" I said, "You heard me. Get out of my kitchen." She stood up straight. She smoothed the front of her jacket. Denise Freeman said coolly, "I'm just looking out for my brother. I said, looking out for your brother would look a lot less like insulting his wife. She picked up her handbag. She went to the door. She stopped. She said, without turning around. Denise Freeman said, you came for the money. We all know it. And when you can't give him children, he's going to know it too. She walked out. I stood in that kitchen alone, the pot on the stove still simmering. The food I had cooked for a woman who just told me to my face that I was a gold digger who couldn't give her brother children. I stood there. I breathed. I breathed. I breathed. And then I made a decision. Not out of revenge, not even out of spite. I made a decision because something in me sat down and got very still and very determined. Yet, although my husband was the one who wanted us to take our time and enjoy marriage a bit without them kids. But I decided I was going to give that man a child. I was going to get pregnant. Not for Denise, not to prove a point. For Cedric, for us, for this life we were building. After all, I'm enjoying my marriage with him, and we have the money and stability. I found out I was pregnant 6 weeks later. 6 weeks, on a Saturday morning in April. I took the test thrice, then a fourth time because I didn't trust the first 3. All 4 said the same thing. I sat on the edge of the bathtub in our master bathroom for a full 7 minutes, just sitting, just feeling this thing that I didn't have a word for. It was terror and joy so mixed together they felt like the same thing. Then I went downstairs, and Cedric was at the kitchen table eating cereal and reading something on his laptop. He looked up. He said, "Morning." And then he looked at my face. He stopped. He said, "What happened?" I held up the test. He went very still. Then he pushed back from the table slowly. He stood up. He walked to me. He took the test from my hand. He looked at it for a long time. Cedric Freeman said, almost a whisper, "Alicia." I said, "I know." He said, "This is..." I said, "I know." And he picked me up. That big, broad-chested man picked me up right there in the kitchen and held me so tight I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. He said, Cedric Freeman said, voice going rough at the edges, "I'm going to be a father?" I pressed my face into his shoulder. I said, "You're going to be a father." We stayed like that for a long time, just the 2 of us. That in our kitchen, in our life, in this beautiful, terrifying, wonderful thing we had made together. I called Monique that afternoon. Monique Bradley screamed for about 30 seconds straight. Monique Bradley said, Girl, Alicia Freeman, are you serious right now?" I was laughing. I said, "Monique," she said, "I'm crying. I'm actually crying. Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Did you eat? What are you craving? I'm coming over." She came over. We sat on the back porch in the April warmth and we talked for hours about everything. About what the baby was going to look like, about names, about how Cedric kept checking on me every 20 minutes like I was going to disappear if he took his eyes off me. It was a good day. One of those days you put in the memory bank and keep. But I didn't tell Denise yet. And I wanted to get through the first trimester. And I needed that time just sincere. Just for me. Just for us. Before it became something to comment on. Something to judge. Something to use. The first trimester was hard. Morning sickness is not just morning. That is a lie that someone told and it has been repeated for generations. Morning sickness is morning, afternoon, evening, 3 in the morning. The middle of the grocery store, every time you smell anything cooking. I was running a full consulting practice while feeling like my body had turned against me. I scaled back where I could. Cedric tried to help. He was very good at trying to help. He was less good at knowing what help looked like in practice. Cedric Freeman said one Thursday night, standing in the kitchen in an apron that he had found in a cabinet and clearly not used before, "Here come making dinner." I said, "Honey?" He said, "No, sit down. You've been on calls all day. Let me do this." I said, "What are you making?" He said, "I looked up a recipe." He said it with such confidence. I sat down. 20 minutes later, the smoke alarm went off and I found him standing over a pan of rice that had somehow burned on the outside and was still hard in the middle. He looked at the pan. He looked at me. Cedric Freeman said, I think the heat was too high. I looked at him, standing there in that apron, looking at the burned rice with the most genuinely baffled expression. And I burst out laughing. The real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. He looked up. He started laughing too. We ordered and ate on the couch and he kept his arm around me all through dinner. That was one of the good nights. I was 14 weeks pregnant when I told the family. Cedric told his side. I told mine. My mama received the news the way she received everything. With both hands, she cried happy tears. You already know my mom. She's always having them tears stored in her eyes for happy moments. She started planning immediately. She was on the phone within an hour talking about the baby shower and what colors and whether it was too soon to start a layette. Cedric's family received it differently. The cousins were warm enough. Some aunts came over and were kind. But Denise, who had told me 6 months earlier that she doubted I could give her brother a child. Denise came over that Sunday. She sat down. She listened to Cedric announce it with this beaming, full-body happiness. She looked at me, and she said, well, just that. Well, Cedric looked at her. Cedric Freeman said, Denise. She smiled. Denise Freeman said, I'm happy. Of course I'm happy. But the way she said it, the way she said, of course, like it was an obligation, like happiness was something she owed and was reluctantly paying. Later, when Cedric stepped out to take a phone call, she leaned toward me. Denise Freeman said, quietly, just make sure you're taking care of yourself. Pregnancy isn't for the weak. I looked at her. I said, thank you for the concern. She looked at my stomach. She said, and get your rest. Things can go wrong very quickly. I said, Denise. She met my eyes. Denise Freeman said, I'm just saying, be careful. And she smiled that smile and went back to her tea. I sat with something cold in my chest. Things can go wrong very quickly. And I told myself she was just being dramatic. I told myself she was just difficult. I told myself she didn't know anything I didn't know. But Lord, some words, once they're said to a pregnant woman, they don't leave. They stay. They take up space you can't afford to give them. The pregnancy progressed. I was 22 weeks when we found out. A boy. Cedric cried at the ultrasound, right there in the clinic. He sat in the chair next to the table where I was lying with the cold gel on my stomach and the technician moving the probe around and the heartbeat filling the small room. And that big, broad-chested man quietly, steadily cried. He didn't make a sound, just the tears coming down. He held my hand the entire time. I looked at the screen. This small, moving shape. This person who was coming. This person we had made. Cedric Freeman said, and still holding my hand, a son. I said, a son. He said, I'm going to teach him everything. I said, you're going to need to learn to cook first. He laughed through the tears. The technician laughed. The whole room felt warm and full of something good. At 7 months, things changed. I don't know how to explain what happened in a way that makes complete sense from the outside, but I'll try. It was a Wednesday night. I had been having what I thought were Braxton Hicks contractions, the practice ones, the ones that don't mean anything, the ones that are supposed to be uncomfortable but not dangerous. I had them on and off all day. I drank water, I sat down, I did everything the book said, but at about 8 o'clock they started coming closer together and harder. By 9 o'clock I knew something was wrong. Cedric was on a call. I didn't want to scare him. I know how ridiculous that sounds. I sat in the living room timing the contractions, telling myself it was nothing, telling myself it was going to slow down, telling myself. Cedric came out of the office at 9:30 and found me on the couch with tears running down my face. He dropped the phone. He was at my side in 2 steps. Cedric Freeman said, Alicia, what's happening? Talk to me. I said, I think we need to go. He had me in the car in 4 minutes. He drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand holding mine. He was talking to me the whole time, steady. His voice low and steady. Cedric Freeman said, I've got you. We're almost there. I've got you, darling. I was squeezing his hand so hard, I kept saying in my head, hold on, hold on, hold on. To the baby, to myself, to whatever was coming. Hold on. And the baby was born at 30 weeks, 2 months early. It was the most terrifying night of my life. I'm not going to give you the full medical details because honestly, some of it I don't remember clearly. When you're in that kind of fear, the details go soft. But what I remember is this: the sound of monitors, the voices of doctors and nurses talking fast and moving fast. Cedric's hand, that hand never left mine. Even when they were doing things I didn't understand. Even when people were moving around me and I couldn't keep track of what was happening. That hand never let go. And then, a cry, small, thin. But there, he was there. Cedric Freeman said, and his voice was barely above a breath. He's here. I said, is he okay? The doctor said he was alive. He was small. He was in the ICU immediately. But he was alive. Yet I couldn't hold him yet. But I could see him, this small, early, brave little person. And I lay in that hospital bed and I cried so hard and so silently that the nurse came in thinking something was wrong. Something was not wrong. Something was so right. He was here. He was ours. He was fighting. I was in the hospital for 8 days. Cedric didn't leave. He slept in the chair beside my bed. He coordinated everything from the hospital, work, family, everything, without once making me feel like it was an inconvenience. He sat with me in the NICU. He read to the baby through the incubator. Actually read, out loud, low voice, whatever book was nearby. I watched that man sit next to that incubator and read to his son in a voice meant to reach past the plastic and the wires and the beeping machines and say, I'm here, son, I'm here, baby. You are not alone, my boy. I will never get over that. When I came home from the hospital, the baby's still in the NICU for continued care. The house felt different, full in some ways, waiting in others. And Denise was there. She had come to help. That's what she said. She had come to help. She was in my kitchen, using my things, rearranging things. I walked in the door on my 8th day home from labor and delivery, with my body still recovering, and my husband beside me, and my son 2 miles away in a hospital incubator. And Denise was in my kitchen rearranging my cabinets. I said, Denise, what are you doing? She turned around with a pleasant expression. Denise Freeman said, you need to rest. I'm getting this kitchen organized so things are easier when the baby comes home. I said, I know where everything in my kitchen is. She said, well, I moved some things around. It makes more sense this way. Cedric put his hand on my back. He said quietly, Denise, thank you for being here. But let's let Alicia rest first. Denise Freeman said, of course. But she stayed. She stayed through dinner. She stayed through the evening. She sat on my couch in my house and she looked at me with the expression of a woman who was waiting for something. And then when Cedric was on a phone call in the other room and it was just us two, Denise looked at me, always talking nasty whenever Cedric is not with us. Denise Freeman said, 7 months, Alicia. I looked at her. She said, you went into labor at 7 months. I said, I know when I gave birth, Denise. She tilted her head. Denise Freeman said slowly, things like that don't just happen. Yeah, you know what they say about stress in pregnancy and about a woman's nature showing itself. I said, what? She met my eyes. Denise Freeman said, a woman who is not right in her spirit can affect her own pregnancy. That's not me being mean. That's just the truth. The room went very quiet. I said, get out of my house. She said, Alicia? I said louder, get out of my house, Denise. Cedric came out of the hallway. He looked between us. He said, what's going on? I said, your sister just told me that it's my fault the baby came early. Cedric turned to look at Denise. The expression on his face changed. Denise Freeman said smoothly, I was talking about stress, the medical evidence on... Cedric Freeman said, Denise. She stopped. He said one word very quiet and very hard, go. She looked at him. He said, go home. Well, we'll talk later. She picked up her bag. She walked out. She didn't look at me on her way. Cedric stood in the hallway for a moment, then he turned to me. He came and he held me. He just held me. He said into my hair, "I'm sorry, honey." I said, "It's not your fault." He said, "It's not yours either." I pressed my face into his chest. He said, "Buse, you are the strongest woman I have ever met in my life." I didn't say anything because I was trying very hard not to fall apart. And sometimes the most generous thing someone can do for you is just hold on while you try. The baby was in the NICU for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waking up and driving to that hospital before the rest of the city was awake. 6 weeks of sitting in that chair beside that incubator and talking to him, telling him about the house, telling him about his daddy's business. It's telling him about Mississippi in summer when the air smells like cut grass and someone always has a grill going somewhere. Telling him, come home, baby. We're waiting for you. At the end of week 6, the doctor called us in for a meeting. Cedric held my hand the whole way to the hospital. The doctor's name was Dr. Terrence Vaughn. He said, "I need you both to hear this." And then he told us. The baby's condition had taken a turn. The prematurity had put stress on his systems. There was a significant concern. He explained it in medical language. I don't need to repeat it all. The bottom of it was this: the prognosis was uncertain. He couldn't promise us the baby would make it. He was doing everything. His team was doing everything. But we needed to be prepared. Cedric sat very still. I sat very still. We drove home in silence. Y'all, we sat in the living room in silence. And then Cedric Freeman said, voice low, "Whatever happens, we face it together." I said, "Together." He took my hand. We sat there. 2 people sitting in a house that had been waiting to receive a baby and not knowing if it was going to. That night was one of the longest of my life. 2 weeks later, Dr. Vaughn called. He called at 9 in the morning. I was at my kitchen table with coffee I hadn't touched. I answered. He said, Dr. Vaughn said, "Mrs. Freeman, I have to tell you something, and I need you to sit down first." I was already sitting. He told me the baby had passed. He said it as gently as a person can say something that cannot be made gentle. He said all the right things about how much the team had done, about how he was sorry, about resources available. I heard the words. I understood them. And then I put the phone down on the table and I sat there. I didn't cry, not yet. I just sat there. I don't know how long. Cedric came in from the back of the house. He saw my face. He knew before I said a word. He crossed that room in 3 steps and caught me right as my whole body gave out. I cried. Lord, I wept. The kind of crying that doesn't have a sound at first, just the shaking, just the whole body trying to hold something that is already gone. He held me. He held me and held me and held me. And he was crying too. I could feel it. Neither one of us said anything because there was nothing to say. Some things are just too big for words. The family was called. People came over. The house filled up with relatives I had seen at the wedding and at Sunday dinners and at gatherings over the past 2 years. Oh, some of them were kind. Some of them said the right things. Some of them sat quietly and just let us grieve. And that was the most generous thing they could do. But some of Cedric's extended family sat in my living room and had a conversation. Not a quiet one, not a whispered one, a conversation at regular volume. 3 of them, 2 of his cousins and an older woman I had met once. They sat in the corner of my living room while I was on the couch, barely holding myself upright. And they laughed, not at something on their phones, not at something unrelated. They were looking at me when they laughed. I heard one of them say, "Well, now he knows." I heard another one say, "I told them she's bad luck." The older woman said something I couldn't quite catch, but the others nodded, and they laughed again. Quiet, contained. Yeah, but aimed directly at me. My mama, God bless her, was across the room, and she saw it. She saw it, and she came and sat next to me and took my hand without saying anything. And I thought, in that broken, grieving, exhausted state, I thought, what did I ever do to these people? What did I do? I loved their family. I loved their brother. I lost a child tonight. What did I do wrong? Months passed. You heal or you try to. You put one foot in front of the other. You go back to work because work is steady, and steady is what you need when everything feels like water. I threw myself into my consulting business. Cedric threw himself into the company. We were both, I think, doing the same thing. Running from a grief we didn't have the bandwidth to sit down and fully feel. We were still good together. We were still us. But there was a tenderness now, like something that had healed, but the skin was still new. Cedric checked on me constantly, not in a smothering way, in the way of a man who has decided that the most important thing he can do every day is make sure his wife knows she is not alone. He brought me flowers on random Mondays. He would come into the office sometimes at lunch, just to be nearby for an hour. He texted throughout the day, not asking anything, just, "How are you today?" Just, "I'm thinking about you." Just, "I love you." That man loved me so well. I want you to remember that. As this story goes forward, I need you to hold on to that, because it's going to matter. Brandy Banks had worked for Cedric for almost 3 years at this point. She was his personal secretary and executive assistant. Sharp woman, organized, good at her job. I had met her a handful of times at company events. She was warm to me. She had sent that fruit basket when we lost the baby. I liked her. In October, Brandy moved into a new apartment. She had a housewarming gathering, small, just some of the office staff and a few friends. She invited Cedric. He went on a Friday evening without thinking much of it, without telling me, actually. Not out of secrecy, just out of the casual way Cedric operated sometimes, going somewhere and mentioning it later. He called me from the parking lot on his way home at about 10 o'clock. He said, "Hey, I was at Brandy's thing, just leaving." I said, "How was it?" He said, "Fine, good food. I'm coming home." I said, "Okay, I'm up." He came home. He was fine, normal Cedric. We watched television for an hour and went to bed. That was Friday. Sunday morning, he woke up not feeling right. By Sunday afternoon, he had a running stomach. By Sunday evening, he had a headache that he described as sitting behind his eyes and pushing. Monday, he was worse. I said, "Cedric, hospital." He said, "It's a stomach thing. It'll pass." I said, "Well, it has not passed in 2 days. He said, "I'm fine, Alicia." That man, stubborn. He was so stubborn about doctors. I went out to handle a client meeting on Monday morning. I made him promise me he would rest, and if he got worse, he would call. He promised. I came home at 2 o'clock. He was resting. I thought he was sleeping. He was resting better than he had been. I thought he was improving. I thought it was passing. I was at a client appointment Thursday when Cedric's office manager, Andre Jefferson, called me. Andre said, "Mrs. Freeman, I don't want to alarm you." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Mr. Freeman left the office early. He asked me to reach out to you." I said, "Where is he?" Andre said, "He went to see a doctor. He asked me to let you know." I said, "Which doctor? Which hospital?" And Andre said, "The name of a hospital. Not our regular doctor. A different one. A hospital across the city." I drove there. I walked into that hospital and I found him. In a room with a man I didn't know sitting beside him. A man in a suit. I walked in. Cedric looked up. The expression on his face it was complicated. It was the expression of a man who has been trying to manage something and has just run out of the ability to manage it alone. He said, "Alicia." I said, "What is going on? Why are you here?" "Who is this, Ambassador?" The man in the suit stood up and introduced himself. He was Cedric's attorney, Rodney Whitfield. I had met him before, at the company, not at our personal attorney level, at the business legal matters level. I said, "Rodney, what is happening?" Rodney said, "Mrs. Freeman, the doctor will be in to speak with you both shortly." I looked at Cedric. I said, "Cedric, look at me. What is happening right now?" Cedric Freeman said very quietly, "Sit down, baby." I sat. He took my hand, and then Dr. Vaughn came in. The same Dr. Vaughn who had treated our son. I recognized him immediately. He sat down. He said, "Mrs. Freeman, thank you for coming," he explained. The test results from the past few days, the substance that had been found in Cedric's system. He didn't call it what it was directly. He spoke in clinical language. But the meaning was clear. Something was found in Cedric's body. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that was harmful. My brain stopped working completely. I said, "What?" Dr. Vaughn said, "We are treating it. He is responding. But Mrs. Freeman, what we found in his system is serious." I said, "What do you mean serious? You mean, are you saying my husband is—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Cedric pressed my hand. Cedric Freeman said, "I'm okay. I'm being treated. I'm going to be okay." I said, but how did, what?" He said, "We don't know yet." He said it steady. Too steady. Like a man who has been thinking about this longer than the last few days, like a man who had already started to know something I didn't. I looked at Rodney. Rodney's face was professional and careful and giving nothing away. I said, "Rodney?" He said, Mrs. Freeman, I think it's best if—" I said, "Tell me what you know." Rodney looked at Cedric. Cedric gave him a slight nod. Rodney said, "Mr. Freeman has asked me to handle some legal matters. He has been working with me this week on some documentation, out of caution." I said, "What kind of documentation?" Rodney said, "A will." The room went very still. I said, "A will?" Cedric said, "It's just precautionary. You know, I've always been meaning to update my affairs," and I said, "Cedric Freeman." He went quiet. I said, "You think something serious is happening? Are you thinking of leaving us?" He looked at me, and the steadiness in his eyes, that beautiful, steady thing that I had loved about him from the first time I looked into them. It was still there. But underneath it now, there was something else, something careful. Something that was protecting me from something it wasn't ready to tell me yet. He said, "I just want to make sure you're taken care of, that's all." I looked at him for a long time. I said, "I don't need to be taken care of. I need my husband to be okay." He said, "I'm going to be okay." He said it like a promise, and I clung to it. I clung to it so hard. He seemed to improve. Over the following 2 weeks, his symptoms lessened. He was out of the hospital. He was home. He was moving more slowly than normal, more tired. But he was home and he was present and he was sitting across from me at dinner and reaching for my hand on the couch, and that was something. That was everything. We didn't talk much about what had happened at the hospital. Every time I tried to bring it up, he redirected. Not cruelly, not dismissively. And I didn't have the words to fight through that. I just watched him. I watched every day. I was cataloging him. The way his face looked in the morning, the sound of his voice, the feeling of his hand. I was memorizing him because something deep in me knew, even when my mind was arguing it away. Something deep in me knew. He passed on a Tuesday morning. He passed away quietly. At home, he had not gone back to the hospital. He had not called anyone. He was there the night before. He was not there in the morning. That's all I can tell you, because the details of that morning are the ones I have never been able to say out loud without losing myself completely. What I can tell you is what came after. The grief was immediate and total, like standing in a room and all the air being removed at once. You don't gasp. You don't understand what's happening. You just stand there in the absence of what was there before. My mama came. Monique came. Andre from the office came. People filled the house. And Cedric's family came. And with them came the other thing. The thing I should have seen coming but didn't. Because I was in the middle of losing my husband. Yeah, because I was underwater. Because a person in that kind of pain does not have the capacity to also be on guard. Denise Freeman arrived at my house after Cedric passed. She arrived with 2 suitcases, like she was moving in. She took over the dining room table. She started making calls. She was organizing the funeral, she said. She was the family, she said. She was handling things, she said. And I was too deep in grief to fight for control of my own dining room table. I let her. Lord, forgive me. I let her. Denise, I later found out, also called Rodney Whitfield, the attorney. She called him before the week was out. Andre told me later he saw the call come through the office system and recognized the name. Denise called Rodney and offered him money to show her the will before it was officially read, to let her know what was in it, or to give her an advance look at what Cedric had left behind. Rodney told her he would let her know. He called her back the next day. He read her what she wanted to hear, what she had apparently been waiting to hear, that she was listed in the will, significantly. She hung up that call happy. I know that now. I know so many things now that I didn't know then, but then I was grieving, and I was about to walk into the worst day of my life. The funeral was held on a Saturday in March. The church was packed. Cedric Freeman had touched more lives than he probably knew. People came from everywhere. Business partners, employees, community members, church family, people from the old neighborhood, people from the new one. A man of substance draws that kind of attendance when he goes. The flowers were beautiful. Now, the church smelled like the good flowers. The real ones, not the fake. The white lilies and roses and the warm, woody smell underneath everything. The choir sang, something about live voices raised together in grief and praise at the same time. It does something to you that no recording can replicate. I sat in the front row in a black dress. My face was bare. I wasn't trying to perform anything. I was just there, trying to be there, trying to hold myself together for the next 90 minutes. Denise sat 2 seats away from me, her blonde wig perfectly set, her all-black outfit impeccable, her rings catching the church light. She sat there with the posture of a woman who believed she was the most important person in the room. The service went, the pastor spoke, the choir sang again. And then they called my name to come to the podium and read Cedric's biography. I had written it myself, 3 drafts. I had read it out loud at home until I thought I could get through it without breaking. I walked to that podium. I picked up the microphone. I looked out at that room full of people who had come to say goodbye to my husband. I started reading his childhood, his mother's sacrifice, his early years working, his first truck, his name on the side of that truck, his company, his community service, his character, the man he was. I got through most of it. My voice cracked twice. I pulled it back. I kept going. I was almost to the end. I was almost there. And then the side door opened, and everything changed. I looked up because the sound of those heels was so deliberate, so pointed, so designed to be heard. There's a Brandy Banks walked down that center aisle and stopped. And I stood there at the podium holding my husband's biography in my hands and looking at the woman who had been working for my husband for years, who had sent me a fruit basket when I lost my son. Brandy Banks said, and she said it so everyone could hear. Brandy Banks said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is something this family deserves to know." I said slow and careful, "Brandy, this is not the time." Brandy Banks tilted her head.
With all
Brandy
due
Banks
respect,
said,
I think it is exactly
"With all
the
due
time."
respect,
It's okay, buddy.
I think it is exactly the time. She turned to face the room, and she said, Brandy Banks said, lifting her chin, "The man lying in that
The man
casket,
lying in that casket,
Cedric Freeman,
Cedric Freeman,
is
your
the father
husband,
of my
is the
child.
father of my child.
Lord have mercy, oh dear God, I almost died." The sound that went through that room, it was not one sound. Yeah, there was 100 sounds, gasps, chairs, voices. A woman in the back crying out, someone near the front saying, "What?" And from the very front row, from the woman in the perfect wig and the knee-high boots, Denise Freeman stood up, and she smiled. She smiled.
That's
Denise
my
Freeman
brother's
said
secret,
loud and
baby
clear,
ma. Say it again, baby. Say it again
Say
for
it
the people
again
in the
for
back.
the people in the back. I gripped that microphone so hard. I opened my mouth. I said nothing, because at that exact moment, the back door opened, and a woman I had never seen in my life walked in. Standing at the entrance of the church where I was burying my husband, looking straight at me. LaToya Green said, My name is Latoya
My name is
Green,
Latoya Green.
And your husband is
and
my
that is
baby
also my
daddy.
child's father.
I felt
He
the
is
floor
my baby
move.
daddy.
I felt the whole world tilt. And then I did not feel anything at all because I was on the floor. Dad, are you seeing this with me? Are you feeling this? Because I need you to understand. I need you to understand that I went down. I actually went down at my husband's funeral with two women standing in the middle of the church claiming my man and the whole room watching. I collapsed. Monique told me later that she moved so fast to get to me that she knocked over two chairs. She said she didn't even feel it. She was just suddenly on the floor beside me. That's friendship. That is what friendship looks like in a crisis. I woke up in a small room off the sanctuary, a room they use for mothers with young children. I was on a couch. Monique was sitting beside me. My mama was on the other side. There was a glass of water on the table. The sound of the service was muffled through the door. It was still going. That my husband's funeral was still going. Without me. Because I had fainted at my own husband's funeral. I said, "What's happening out there?" Monique looked at my mama. My mama took my hand. She said, "Baby, just rest for a..." I said, "Mama, what is happening out there right now?" She sighed. She said, "Denise is addressing the room." I sat up so fast the room spun. I said, "I need to get up." Monique said, "Alicia." I said, "I need to get back in there. That is my husband's funeral." I got up. My legs were unsteady. Monique was on one side. Mama was on the other. We walked back to the door. We walked back into that sanctuary. And the first thing I heard was Denise's voice, carrying over the whole room like she was born for a microphone. Denise Freeman said, since his wife could not give him what he needed at home, he sought it elsewhere. These women, these children, they are my late brother's legacy, and they deserve to be recognized. The room was the strangest mix of sounds I have ever heard. Some people were speaking in agreement. Some were silent. Some were clearly uncomfortable. Some a few, were looking at me as I came back through that door. And the looks on their faces. Pity. Some of them, the kind of pity that has a little bit of satisfaction underneath it. The kind that says, I always wondered. I walked to my seat. I sat down. I sat straight. I did not give Denise Freeman the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart again. I sat there with my mama's hand in mine, and I listened. The lawyer was called, Rodney Whitfield, right there at the funeral. Denise called him up like she had planned this, like this was all choreographed, like this was always the plan. Then he came forward with the will. He read it. I sat there and listened to my husband's name on every page and the words that came after it. Half of the property. To Denise Freeman. His sister. The other half. To his children. His two children. The ones the women had just claimed publicly. In a church. At his funeral. Nothing. For me. Or there was something. A provision. A small one. Something like a courtesy. Like a thank you for your time. I heard it and I didn't understand it, and I still don't have words for what I felt, because this man who had looked at me like I was everything, who had held my hand in the delivery room, who had read to our son through an incubator, who had brought me flowers on random Mondays just because, had apparently did what they were saying he did. Lord, I kept thinking, that's in a loop, in a circle. He wouldn't. I know this man. I know his hands. I know how he sleeps. I know the way he says my name. He wouldn't. But everybody in that room heard the will. Everybody in that room heard those women. And he wrote this will to include both kids. He definitely knew about them. They are his, whether I believe them or not. I stood up and I walked out. I couldn't sit there anymore. I walked out of that church with my head up, no tears on my face, no scene. I walked out the side door, into the March air, into the parking lot. I made it to my car. I got in, I closed the door, and then I let myself feel it. Baby. I sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes, just sitting, just trying to figure out how to be a person again. How to be a woman who has just buried her husband and been publicly told that he had not been what she thought he was. 2 women. 2. In a church, at a funeral, with 2 children, and a will that confirmed it. I kept thinking about things, small things. Times he had been away, and I hadn't thought anything of it. Times his phone had been face down on the table. Times he had been quieter than usual. I was looking for evidence in my memory, trying to make the story fit, trying to understand, and I couldn't find it. I genuinely could not find it. But I also thought, would I know? You hear women say, I would know if my man was cheating. I always believed that about myself too. I'm observant. I am not naive. But, I sat in that parking lot, and I thought about every woman who ever sat somewhere and realized she had not known. And I understood them in a way I never had before. Months passed, the way months pass after a loss, not smoothly, not in a clean, progressive line. They move in circles. A good day, then a terrible one. A week where you feel almost normal. Then a day that comes out of nowhere and knocks you down. I kept working. Work was the only thing that made sense. I had the consulting practice. I had clients who needed me to show up and be useful. And being useful was the one thing that reminded me I still existed. Monique checked on me every day, every single day. A text, a call. Some days she just showed up. Monique Bradley showing up at your door with food and the willingness to sit in silence with you is one of the great gifts the world has to offer. My mama came over on weekends. She cooked. She didn't say much about Cedric. She didn't press. Oh, she just came and cooked and sat with me, and I let her. The legal process of transferring the properties was set in motion. Rodney's office sent documentation. I had to sign things I did not want to sign, acknowledging the terms of the will, acknowledging that the assets were going where they were going. I signed, because what choice did I have? Denise came by my house twice during this period. Twice, uninvited. The first time I didn't answer the door. The second time I did. I don't know why I answered. Something like, let me hear what she has to say. Let me look at her face. Let me see what a woman looks like when she has won. She stood at my door. She looked at me. Denise Freeman said, I'm not here to gloat. I said, then why are you here? She said, I wanted to see how you're doing. I looked at her all those years. All those comments? That thing she said in my kitchen, that thing she said at the funeral. I looked at her face and I tried to find something human in it, something that was just a woman who loved her brother and was hurting, something I could understand. I couldn't find it. Or maybe I couldn't see it. I said, I'm fine, Denise. She nodded. She said, the legal team will be reaching out. I said, I know. She said, it shouldn't take long. The process, I said, I know. And she paused. She looked at me for a moment. Denise Freeman said, for what it's worth. I waited. She said, you were a good wife to him. Something caught in my throat. I said, I know I was. She nodded again. She left. I closed the door, and I stood in the hallway of my house for a long time. Monique came over that evening. We sat on the back porch. The April air was starting to feel like itself again. Warm. The kind that doesn't apologize. Monique said, what are you going to do? I said, about what? She said, everything. I looked out at the yard. I said, keep moving. She said, the house? I said, they're not taking the house. That was mine before the marriage. My business bought this house. She nodded. She said, the business assets? I said, the consulting business is mine entirely. The shares in Freeman Logistics that were gifted to me before the will was updated. Rodney confirmed those are separate. Monique looked at me. Monique Bradley said, you are the most measured woman I have ever met in my life. I said, I'm terrified. She said, I know. I said, yet I am so terrified and so angry and so heartbroken, and I don't even know which one of those I'm allowed to feel right now. She reached over and took my hand. She said, all of them. You're allowed to feel all of them. I looked at my hand in hers. I said, Monique, I keep thinking about what Brandy said, what LaToya said, and I keep thinking, whoops, he wouldn't. I know him. He wouldn't. Monique was quiet. She said carefully, Baby, sometimes we think we know. I said, No, I know what you're going to say, and I hear you. But Monique, I know this man. I know how he loved me. It doesn't fit. She squeezed my hand. She didn't argue. She just held my hand. And she let me have that. Even if she didn't believe it, she let me have that. The meeting to formally transfer the properties was set for a Monday in June, 3 months after the funeral. In Rodney's office, all parties present, me, Denise, Brandy Banks, LaToya Green, Rodney and his team. I dressed carefully that morning. I put on my best work dress. I did my hair. I wore my good shoes. If they were going to look at me, I was going to make sure they saw a woman who was still standing. I arrived at Rodney's office building at 9:45 for a 10 o'clock meeting. I walked into the lobby. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. I walked into the conference room. Denise was already there, sitting at the head of the conference table like she was the one hosting. Brandy was there with her. LaToya came in 2 minutes after me. We didn't look at each other. The room was the careful, professional, legally managed silence of a room full of people who have unfinished business and are pretending it's a meeting. Then Rodney came in at 10 exactly. He sat down. He set a folder in front of him. He said, Thank you all for being here. We're going to go through the property transfers today. There is also an additional document I have been holding that is now due to be opened. Denise said, What additional document? Rodney said, Mr. Freeman gave me a sealed envelope before his passing. He instructed that it be open at this meeting specifically. Denise Freeman said, I wasn't told about any envelope. Rodney said, That was by design, Ms. Freeman. The room shifted. Something in the air changed. Denise's expression changed, just slightly, just enough. But I caught it. And something in me, that part of me that observes, that files things away, that catches what other people miss, something in me sat up and waited. Rodney opened the folder, and he removed the document transfers first. He went through them procedurally, listing out property by property, asset by asset. Denise was paying attention, leaning slightly forward. Brandy was still. LaToya was looking at the table. I was watching Rodney. I was watching his face. After the property review, Rodney set down the main documents. He reached back into his briefcase. He removed a sealed envelope, white, thick, sealed with what looked like a notary stamp. He set it on the table. Denise reached for it. Rodney put his hand over it gently. Rodney Whitfield said, This is to be read aloud to the full room, Mrs. Freeman, per the instructions of your brother. Denise pulled her hand back. Rodney opened the envelope. He removed several pages. He cleared his throat. He began to read. And he read the opening lines about it being a sworn statement made of sound mind and full clarity. He read Cedric's full name. And then things started happening. The letter said that in the weeks following the housewarming gathering at Brandy's apartment, Cedric had become aware that something was wrong with his body. He had felt the effects before. He had done some research. He had recognized what was happening, and he had, quietly and methodically, begun to document everything. Rodney read on. The letter stated that Cedric had reason to believe that the substance in his system had been introduced at Brandy's apartment, that he had not eaten or drunk anything outside of that gathering in the preceding 48 hours, that Brandy Banks, who had worked for him for 3 years, had been in contact with a third party, a party Cedric named. He named Denise Freeman, his sister. The letter said that Cedric had information, documented with records, that Denise had approached Brandy with a proposition, a financial proposition, that involved the circumstances of Cedric's health and the circumstances of what would happen after. The letter described a plan to introduce a harmful substance, to create false claims about children, to manipulate the will documentation, to ensure that Denise received the majority of assets and that any legitimate claim Alicia had would be minimized. And it named LaToya Green, who was not a stranger to Cedric, who was a woman Denise had recruited, who had never been in any kind of relationship with Cedric Freeman, not once, not ever. And Brandy Banks, who Cedric had trusted, who he had welcomed into his professional life, and who had attended his wife's grief with a fruit basket, and who had been working against him for longer than he had known. The room was very silent. Rodney kept reading. And then he got to the page that made my whole world flip over. The letter said about the baby, about the son, about the premature son who Alicia had been told had passed. Cedric wrote that the story he and Dr. Vaughn had given her was not the full truth. That after everything that had happened with Denise, after overhearing his sister, after what he had started to suspect, he had made a decision, a terrible, painful, lonely decision that was done with one intention, to protect his son. Cedric had worked with Dr. Vaughn. The boy had not passed. The boy was alive. He had been placed in a safe and secure situation under Dr. Elval Vaughn's care and guardianship until the time was right, until the threat could be documented and addressed, until Cedric could ensure that what was coming, what he knew was coming, would not touch his son. He wrote, "Alicia, I am sorry. I am more sorry than I have words for. You should never have had to carry that grief of our son, but I could not let him be in danger. I could not let anyone who would harm me for money get close to our child. Protecting him meant letting you think he was gone. My sister was planning to take him out and she caused the premature birth. And I will spend whatever time I have left making that right." I stopped hearing the rest for a moment. I stopped hearing because the room was spinning. My son was alive, my son. Rodney finished reading. He set the papers down. The room was completely still. Yet Denise Freeman had gone white, actually white. Underneath the chocolate of her skin, there was an ashy stillness. Brandy Banks had not moved. LaToya Green was looking at the table. I was holding the edge of the conference table with both hands, just holding. Because if I let go of something solid right now, I was going to fly apart completely. Rodney looked at Denise. He said, "Miss Freeman, I should inform you that in addition to this letter, Mr. Cedric Freeman also provided this office with documented evidence, correspondence, financial records, and a recorded conversation that corroborates everything in this statement." Denise said, "That's..." She stopped. She tried again. Denise Freeman said, "That document could be forged," and then the door opened. The conference room door. The one behind Rodney. It opened. Doctor. Now, Terrence Vaughn walked in. I recognized him immediately. He walked in calmly. He sat down. He said, "Mrs. Freeman." He said it to me. He said, "I have something to give you." He turned to the door. He said, "Come in." And the door opened again. And Cedric Freeman walked through it. "I need you to sit with this. I need you to actually sit," because I was sitting. I was sitting in that chair and my husband walked through that door. My husband, who I had buried 4 months ago, who I had stood at the podium and read the biography of. Cedric Freeman, bald head, full beard, broad chest, dark skin, walking into that conference room, alive. And he was carrying a child who had his eyes, the same jaw, the boy who had been our premature son, who I had been told was gone, who I had grieved, who had been hidden away, protected, kept safe with his father. I made a sound I don't have a name for. I don't know how to describe it. It was not a word. It was not a scream. It was something that comes from a place in a person that doesn't usually make noise. I was out of that chair before I knew I was moving. "And Cedric." "God," Cedric Freeman said, his voice breaking completely for the first time I had ever heard it break. Cedric Freeman said, "Alicia." I hit him so hard I almost knocked him back. I yanked my baby from him and held him so tight as if he was going to dissolve into me. Cedric was saying my name over and over in my ear. My name, my name, my name. I was just in this moment in another world with my son as if it's a dream. And I was crying in a way I did not know I was capable of. Not the grief kind. Something else entirely. Something on the other side of grief. Something that only comes when the thing you lost comes back. I'm going to pause right here because I know you have questions. I had questions, a lot of them. Starting with Cedric Freeman. I love you, and I also need you to explain yourself. Right now. Now, here's what I learned. In the weeks after the housewarming gathering, when Cedric felt the effects of what had been put in his food or drink, he had suspected it. He had not been caught off guard. He had been watching Denise for months. He told me he had overheard something. He usually pretend to take a call outside to allow Denise say those stuffs unknown to us that he has a secret recorder in the house. A night, months before, when he had come home unexpectedly. He had overheard Denise on a phone call in the hallway of the house, a conversation she didn't know he was listening to, about plans, about timelines, about money and assets and what would happen when. He didn't have enough yet to act on, but he had started recording. He had started documenting. He had gone to Rodney and put things in place. Yet then when the substance showed up in his system, he had gone to Dr. Vaughn. And Dr. Vaughn, the same doctor who had delivered our son, who had cared for our son, who had told us our son was gone, Dr. Vaughn had been brought into the plan to disappear, to let Denise believe she had won, to let the scheme run to its conclusion. While they gathered evidence, while law enforcement was being briefed, while the documentation was being assembled, the false body in the casket. Yes, there was a false body. He will not tell me the details of how that was arranged. He has said it involved cooperation from the local authorities who had been briefed on the situation. I have chosen not to press on those details because some things, once you know them, you cannot unknow. And I am a woman who has learned to choose what she carries. The son, our son. He had been placed with a trusted family member on Cedric's mother's side. Someone outside the orbit of Denise's influence. Someone Cedric trusted completely. He had been there, growing, safe, not knowing the full story, but safe. When Cedric came back, he brought him home. Now. The moment Cedric walked into that conference room, the people in that room had to reckon with something. Denise Freeman looked at her brother, the brother she had been trying to rob, the brother she had tried to harm, the brother she had stood at a funeral for and declared dead with his wife standing right there. And she was looking at him standing alive in a conference room with police officers who had entered quietly behind him. 2 officers, and Rodney setting down a file that contained more documentation than she had apparently anticipated. Brandy Banks looked at the officers and went still. LaToya Green started to stand. She didn't get far. Cedric Freeman said, and he said it to the room, to all of them, but his eyes were on his sister. Cedric Freeman said, I want a DNA test, for the record, for the court record, because I want it documented what the truth is. Denise Freeman said nothing. Denise Freeman, who had spoken loudly and confidently in every room she had ever been in. Denise Freeman, who had organized a funeral and called a lawyer and claimed half of her brother's business, said nothing. Brandy Banks said very quietly. Brandy Banks said, I want a lawyer. Rodney said, you can speak with one at the station. And the officers moved forward. The DNA tests were done. For the record, for the court. Brandy's child had no biological connection to Cedric Freeman. And LaToya Green's child had no biological connection to Cedric Freeman. None. 0. The whole claim that he sent son. The women at the funeral, the children, the whole performance was exactly what it was. A performance arranged by Denise, funded by Denise, for Denise. Denise Freeman was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge did not have a light hand. The combination of the conspiracy charge, the assault charge relating to the harmful substance, the fraud related to the will manipulation, and the evidence of deliberate orchestration. Life. Brandy Banks and LaToya Green received 7 years each with a significant financial penalty. Rodney Whitfield, the lawyer who had taken money to show Denise the forged will version, he had been cooperating with authorities from the moment Cedric brought him into the plan. The money Denise had given him, documented evidence. He had been part of the plan to expose her. He continued as Cedric's attorney. The real will, the real one. The one Cedric had written with full intention and full love. Left everything to his son and to his wife. Everything, the business, the assets, the investments, the future he had been building, left to the two people he loved most in the world. Now, I need to address something, because I have been asked by Monique, by many people who heard this story. They said, Alicia, weren't you angry at Cedric? And the answer is yes, and no, and complicated. Was I angry that he let me think our son was gone? Yes, there is a grief I carry for that time. For the months I spent believing I had lost a child. I'm sure no woman can tell me that feels right. The weight of that morning, that was real. And even knowing now that he was alive, the grief I felt then was real. And I had to grieve it. I had to grieve the grief itself, which is a very specific kind of complicated. Was I angry that he let me go to that conference room not knowing what was about to happen? Yes, because Lord, that man could have warned me. He would tell you he couldn't. He would tell you it needed to be genuine. He will tell you my authentic reaction was necessary for the plan to work. He will say it with such patient certainty that I cannot fully argue with him. But I still give him the look. He knows the look. He has had it pointed at him on numerous occasions. Was I angry that he is alive? No, not for 1 second. Our son, let me tell you about our son. His name is Devin Freeman. He had his daddy's eyes, his daddy's jaw, his daddy's broad-shouldered, deliberate way of moving through a space. He had my stubbornness and my mother's cheekbones. He was raised well. The family who kept him had done a beautiful job. He is a good boy, a gentle boy, a boy with a quiet kind of certainty about himself. When he and I were first in the same room together, when he first called me mama, I'm not going to try to describe that to you. Some things are not for description. Some things are just for feeling and holding and thanking God for. Just know your baby girl cried and screamed all around. I kept saying, I'm a mommy, I'm your mama.
Say da 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 da.
Mama.
He just hates me so much. Take that.
Baby boy, grandma don't play with her hat.
Devin grew
Oh,
up, he
you
got
so
himself
cute.
together, went to school, fell in love. Yet married a woman named Kendra, funny enough, same as my mama, who loved him the way a person should be loved, completely, out loud, without apology. They got married, beautiful wedding, me and Cedric in the front row, my mama beside me in her good hat, Monique in a dress that she had been talking about for 6 months. Devin stood at that altar with the steadiness of a man who knows exactly where he comes from and exactly where he's going. And when his wife came through those doors, he looked at her the same way his father had looked at me 20-something years before. Like she was something he hadn't expected. Like she was something he wasn't entirely sure he deserved. Yes, it moves through, doesn't it? The way love moves through families, like something in the blood. They weren't able to conceive until after 6 years, and I never for once pressured any of them. 6 years after the wedding. Devin called me on a Wednesday morning. He said, Mama, sit down. I said, Devin. He said, Mama, Kendra's pregnant. I made a sound. He laughed. He said, and Mama, they told us at the ultrasound. He paused. He was enjoying this. He has his father's sense of timing. Devin Freeman said, it's triplets. I said, what? He said, 3 girls, Mama. I said, Lord, this is your doing. He burst out laughing. I was already crying. 3 granddaughters, 3 coming into this world, into a family that has been through fire, into a family that has been lied to and robbed and grieved and restored, into a family that loves each other loudly and deliberately and on purpose. 3 girls. I am a grandmother now. 3 times over. In 1 delivery, which my mama says is God showing off. She might be right. I hold those babies. I hold them and I think about everything that had to happen. Every painful thing, every terrible morning, every night I spent thinking I had lost everything. Everything that had to happen to arrive at this exact moment, at this kitchen, at these 3 girls, at this family. And I think about what my mother always told me. She used to say, Alicia, the people who try to take from you, they don't understand that what you have isn't in the money or the property. What you have is in your character, and your character doesn't go in a will. She was right, Lord, she was right. Now, I became a mother-in-law to Devon's wife, and I made myself a promise. I made myself a promise the day Devon told me he was engaged. And I sat down and I thought about every Sunday dinner I had sat through. Every comment in my kitchen, every laugh in my living room, every you came for the money and you can't give him children and things can go wrong very quickly. I thought about every single one of those moments, and I decided that Kendra was never going to feel that way in my presence. Not one day, not 1 hour, not in one room that I was in. I decided to be the mother-in-law who shows up with food and stays out of the way, who is available when asked, who does not rearrange kitchens, who does not speak on fertility, who does not show up with 2 suitcases and a plan to take over, who loves her son's wife the way a daughter needs to be loved, fully, with trust, with respect, with the kind of consistent, present, non-invasive love that says, you are safe here. If you are part of this family, you are my daughter, not by performance, not on condition, just because you love my son and my son loves you. And that is enough. Kendra, my daughter-in-law, she tells people I'm her favorite person. She says it to my face. She says, Miss Alicia is the mother I always wanted. And Lord, good Lord, that is better than any business win I have ever had. That is better than any contract or any check. That is the wealth I was actually building all along, and I didn't even know it. Now I want to hear from you. Get in those comments. What did you think about Denise's behavior? Would you divorce your husband because of a cruel and heartless sister-in-law? I'm talking about her attitude before her secret was exposed. Can you cope with such in-law? Or would you walk away from the love of your life because of a toxic family situation? Please, I need you to say something in the comments and tell me how you would have handled your in-law situation before the revelation. And what about Denise's past? Should we consider that as a tool for her cruelty? 5 marriages. She got married 5 times. All that intelligence, all her boldness pointed in the wrong direction? Is there any version of this story where she deserved mercy or pity? Tell me what you think. Is she that way because she never had any luck with a good man or had a stable marriage with anyone? Drop it in the comments below and let's discuss it. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button on Precify Stories if you haven't already. Now, this channel is too good for you to just go without subscribing for more. Turn on that notification bell, because we have over 150 stories on this channel. Every genre, every emotion, every kind of story that will make you feel something you didn't know you needed to feel. Subscribe and join the Precify family. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that what's meant for them cannot permanently be taken away. Go check out our other stories. You will not run out. I promise you that. Precify is a warehouse of story, and we never run out of good stories. Just check out other ones we have on the channel already waiting for you. And to every single one of you watching from your country, drop your country in the comments. I want to see where my story has traveled, because this story belongs to all of us. Now, let me tell you what I know now, what this whole story taught me. Because if I went through all of that, all of it, and didn't come out the other side with something worth saying, then what was the point of telling my story? So here it is. The truth I have earned. People will try to define you. They will try to take the story of your life and rewrite it with themselves as the most important character. They will call you a gold digger when you're actually a builder. They will call you barren when you are actually abundant. They will call you a problem when you are actually the solution. Let them say what they say. Do not give them the satisfaction of a response that costs you your dignity. Your life will answer eventually. Your life always answers. And also know that love is not naive. I know that now. And I thought for a long time that loving Cedric fully meant trusting everything without question. And it did mean that. But real love also asks questions. Real love says, talk to me. Real love says, I can handle the truth. Real love says, do not protect me from the hard thing by carrying the hard thing alone. Cedric learned that. We worked through it. It took time, honest, patient, sometimes uncomfortable time. But we worked through it because love that has been through something is stronger than love that hasn't. It has texture, it has history, it has proof. And that kind of love does not leave when things get hard. It just gets better at being there. What about the lesson from Denise? Of course, there's something to learn from her part of the story. Bitterness is expensive. So Denise spent years building a plan to take something from her own brother. Years of strategy, years of manipulation. And she ended up in prison with nothing. No property, no relationship, no marriage, no child, no legacy, no peace. If she had spent even a fraction of that energy on building her own life, on healing whatever wound made her believe her brother's success had to come at her expense, she could have had something real. She had the ability. She had the intelligence. Lord knows she had the boldness. She had all the tools. She just aimed them in the wrong direction. Bitterness pointed outward. Destroys everything around you, including yourself. And lastly, this one is the one I want you to carry. The one I want you to put in your pocket and take home. What was meant for you cannot be permanently taken. Can it be delayed? Yes. Can it be complicated? Absolutely. Can people get in the way and cause damage and make things so much harder than they needed to be? Of course. But what is yours? What has your name written in the fabric of the universe? What God built for you before you were born? That doesn't go anywhere. It waits. It works through other people's schemes. It moves around obstacles. It comes through. It always comes through. My son came through. My husband came through. My family came through. The life I built with my hands, with my mind, with my stubborn, relentless, Mississippi-raised determination. It came through. Every bit of it. My mama is still in her good hat, still in the front row and crying happy tears about everything. She cried when Devin was born the first time she held him. She said, Kendra Whitfield said, yeah, with her face full of light, baby, you got it all back. You got it all back and then some. She was right. I got it all back and then some. 3 girls, a husband who came back from the dead, a son who calls me on Wednesday mornings with the best news, a best friend who still shows up with food. We helped my best friend financially and she had a good life herself with her husband and 4 children too. So, that is my story. That is the story of Alicia Freeman, who thought she had lost everything and found out she had never really lost a thing, just misplaced it for a while, and it found its way home. And remember, your story is not over, not even close. Thank you. God bless you.